Welcome everybody. My name is Jeta Jara. I'm a journalist in Kosovo and deal with fact-checking. And it is my honor to navigate today a panel, moderate a panel with people who are working with fact-checking and tools and academia and civil society in their own countries. I have a really good, diverse panel from Romania, Madagascar, France, Australia, and Ghana. I've never had a more diverse panel in my career from different continents, not even different countries. In our country, diaspora is seen as quite shiny, glory, patriotic, and wealthy image. This is the folkloric image of our diaspora. The darker side is that it's clearly diaspora too, like normal societies, is affected by extremism, radicalization, criminality, disinformation. I'm really happy that the Ulpiana Forum has, in its third year, decided to elaborate on the brighter, and we are discussing, this is a very unusual maybe topic, fact versus fiction, to be discussing in a forum for diaspora. And I'm glad that the sophistication behind this forum is reaching to the point that it is recognizing that misinformation impacts the local societies, but also diaspora societies. The diaspora is no different. That what we see in here, the diaspora is the image of a diaspora person is coming with a fancy car, driving around, getting the best girls, and fueling our economy, being the wealthiest. And it doesn't look like they would be prone to anything bad, or they would be spreaders of this information, or taking this information. So today we will discuss that dynamics of disinformation, fact versus fiction, between local communities and diaspora communities. We will start off with Romania, with Andra Lucia Martinescu, who's a co-founder of the Diaspora Initiative, based in United Kingdom, although she's from Romania. But let me introduce everybody else who will come after her. From Ghana, we have Andrianina Irina Randriarivelo, founder and editor of Mada Living from Madagascar. Next to her is my French colleague, Hélène Carsenat, founder of Namsur from France, who is doing tools, who will tell us about tools that impact information and disinformation at the same time. Next to him is an academic from Australia, Alan Gamlin, director of Migration Hub ANU, and professor in the School of Regulation in ANU University in Australia. And my colleague from Ghana, who runs, is a senior technical instructor of labs, DBT labs in Ghana, who will speak about small communities without much resources dealing with this information. We'll start with Romania, because you have a drama ongoing with a president that was chosen and now who's been annulled in an election, who was thankful to existence of TikTok and the existence of diaspora for voting this far-right winner of elections as president in Romania, an election that was annulled. How did diaspora influence that election? And what are the lessons we can learn from it? And we start also from you, because you're geographically closest to Kosovo, and we'd love to hear about what's going on there.
Thank you so much. I'm Andra Lucia, co-founder of the Diaspora Initiative. Humbled and proud to be here in front of you, sharing what will become, in fact, two stories. One of how the Diaspora Initiative came about, and the second one, how we managed to expose and uncover a vast misinformation campaign that brought to the fore the presidential contender, a far-right pro-Russian extremist. In the meantime, the second tour of Romania's presidential elections has been cancelled, so he wasn't officially elected yet. And the first story starts like this. In August 2018, my mom and Gran participated in the sweeping diaspora protests in Bucharest, where our civil society, my family included, were violently repressed by the gendarmerie. Even before the protests, our diaspora has been intensely politicized, used, capitalized on for votes, gradually becoming radicalized under the pressures and influence of populism. And this was the pivot moment in the decision to dedicate myself to diaspora research, to harness the theory of social networks, to map and understand diasporas, their transnational impact and influence. And I believe the most meaningful impact of our work with TDI was with grassroots diaspora civic organizations, which were long neglected and ostracized by the politics of populism. And here I would say, and would love to mention, it's quite personal, it's the belief that our identity as a Romanian diaspora is also civic. It builds anchored in these ethno-nationalist ideals of belonging that tell you and dictate how to be a true Romanian or a true patriot. So building on this work, which takes me to the second story, such a network came to life during the more recent presidential campaign. And with contributions from diaspora community volunteers, investigative journalists, data analysts, experts like myself, our mission was to bring together civil societies from across the region, from Ukraine, from Romania, building on recent experiences with elections in Moldova, and using an AI-powered advanced software. It's called Osavul. It was developed by two Ukrainian co-founders. We managed to uncover and expose a massive operation of influence perpetrated by a hostile foreign political actor, state-affiliated actor.
In UK? Or in Romania?
Everywhere, to be honest. In most countries, yes. Yeah, some networks previous investigations revealed the massive influence campaign conducted on TikTok between the two presidential tours. However, we managed to uncover a much vaster operation of influence and destabilization of...
What were the tools used? Can you give us more details on how these networks were influencing elections, were spreading fake news?
Yes, they were amplifying his image in the midst of the campaigning. For example, spreading conspiracy theories, building Georgescu's persona as a whistleblower, because he previously worked for the UN, and he exposed a global oligarchic system that trades in child pedophilia. And
was that true or not true?
Obviously not true.
Okay.
Yes, yeah. So starting from this, we just managed to uncover networks of connected accounts, you have to see it as a wider network. Accounts, channel, not only on TikTok, but on Facebook, on Twitter, on Telegram, some originating in Russia and coordinating the messages to amplify his persona, to amplify his conspiracy.
And did this happen during the election or after he was elected?
Both. Starting in 2023, when he gave this interview that was the source of all the conspiracies that have been spreaded. And I mentioned operation of influence, which is defined as an action of destabilization perpetrated by a foreign actor. And in this case, the overwhelming data show that most of these actions originated in Russia and were networks affiliated with Russia.
And how did you expose this? What was the level of exposure, and where did you publish this exposure?
So these networks, which gather accounts, channel, web pages, sites, so on and so forth, have accumulated audience of hundreds of millions, 543 million followers. Put all together. And they're from different countries. So you could see the same coordinated message in Europe, South America, North America, in Russia, of course, trying to spread state narratives about the war in Ukraine, trying to dissuade support for Ukraine. Romania has supported Ukraine since the war, and trying to position Romania, the same happened in with the Moldovan elections, trying to position Romania as a neutral state to dent our democratic European values. You know, Romania neither in the East nor the West. For instance, another narrative, the authorities are sending our men because the war is imminent. This was another information that was...
and did Romanian media pick up?
Investigative journalists, they proof of concept. We showed them the advanced AI-powered software that we used.
So how many staff did you use to discover all this?
3.
3?
Yeah.
Minimum?
3, yeah. And then it became a build-up because more media outlets in Romania started their own investigations, and in the end enough civic pressure has been built as to determine authorities to publish their own evidence, which was previously kept a secret. And as a consequence, from all this cumulated build-up, the Constitutional Court decided to cancel the first tour of elections.
Yesterday, was it? Or day before?
Last Friday.
Last Friday. So did the Constitutional Court decision to annul this president's victory refer...
It wasn't yet a full victory. There were 2 contenders in the second
initial
tour.
victory, first round.
Yeah.
Did the Constitutional Court decision reference your investigation as well in the decision, or any?
Not necessarily. No, because I believe by Romanian law you can't use this type of evidence. However, we had responsible and competent authorities reaching out to us to be able to share the data and make for a bigger case with the European Commission.
Excellent. It does impress me as somebody who daily tries to look at how, with as little money as possible, to impact people who are spreading lies with lots of money. That it doesn't cost this much. As a practitioner, it amazes me that with tools you can do 3 people, you can debunk a huge conspiracy that influences your country that much, that a guy like that, unknown, but through all the election. Madagascar, because Andreanina, I know you are looking for ways. You have opened in a very kind of isolated community like Madagascar, opened a newsletter and decided to do it in English. Very curious about how you chose the medium, you chose the language, what were you doing to impact with this? Because we have largely all diaspora, but in Kosovo there is a big debate about young people coming over and not being articulate in a local language, but being very cosmopolitan, very needed for our country, but not being able to articulate themselves in a local language. How did you make yourself useful for the country despite deciding to communicate in their native language?
Hello, everyone. And I'm so honored to be invited to speak on this panel. And so I'm a real diaspora kid. I was born in the U.S., raised there until I was 18. And in 2017, I had this conversation with my ex's Danish grandmother, and she asked me, "What is Madagascar like?" And I was so ashamed because I couldn't explain, what is the country like? How do people live? I could only discuss, what our diaspora is like in Washington, D.C., where I was raised, our music, our culture, the food, but I couldn't say to you what's the daily life like. And Madagascar became my North Star. And in 2019, I went there for the first time, 14 years. The last time was in 2004. And I did a volunteer program, and then I found a way to integrate into society. And then I became an intern for the U.S. Embassy. And through these experiences, I was like, wow, if I'm having this experience, I would love to share this with other diaspora who also would love to come back, but don't necessarily have the mechanisms and, network to get back to the country. And in 2020, during COVID, my co-founder and I decided we didn't want to create a consulting firm. We didn't want to create, something that would put at risk others, because it is risky to, create a business in Madagascar, especially the landscape, political, economic wise. But we wanted to disseminate information and share, experiences. And we made a really conscious decision not to be a news outlet. For me, in Madagascar, news is paid for, the truth is paid for. And also one day, facts and truth can change to the next day. And rather than, retracting, redacting, every day, I wanted to become more of a cultural provocateur and really show diaspora and local people, these are discussions that we should be having, but we're not able to because we're actually, for being a peaceful country, it's actually growing more and more anti-free press. I have a great friend, Gael Borgia. She is a journalist, Franco-Malagasy journalist. She covered the 2019 Malagasy elections and uncovered how Russia was involving in the elections. And from then, her phone is tapped. She's a courageous woman, no security, but that, even though I have a position of privilege, social capital and everything, I didn't want to put myself and my contributors in a position to be sought after the government. If you like those opposing the government, they will put your address and contact out, and they will come and knock on your door and ask, is this true? Did you like this? Where, that should be part of free speech, and we have that, but
you missed the big news here, is that you decided after being put up in the U.S.
Yes, I wanted to move.
Why did you decide to move and open an English-speaking media at all? That's the news.
Well, the unconventional path is I came from international business and development, but I didn't necessarily like working in those fields. I really wanted to share stories about our diaspora, share local views, points of views that are not being shared. And we do it in English because I grew up speaking Malagasy English, but I'm more comfortable in English. I can speak, with people in Malagasy, but difficulty writing. And our second language is French. And I'm an Anglophone, but I can understand and speak French, but there's already enough saturated media French, and I wanted, to be one of the first English-speaking media sources,
And you are doing this, I understand, it's very important, an English-speaking newsletter online with minimum staff?
Yeah, minimum staff. We're about
voluntarily?
Me, my co-founder, and freelance writers. Mm-hmm. Yes.
What is publishing in English creating for you? Is it a plus? Is it a minus? What was the minus? In the sense that as you told me, Madagascar is a population of 20 million.
28.
Out of which a small...
Yeah. So our diaspora, compared to our diaspora is about less than 300,000. And that's the ones that are registered. I'm not sure if there's more or less. Publish who can afford internet, that's small. Even smaller, people who can read and understand English. So it's a very small niche, which is positive. What else?
In that, it's positive in that
It's positive
you can
that-
publish more than...
Yeah.
You got more tolerance from authorities in what you can publish, right?
We get away, but I have to post anonymous, opinionated articles if it is a political, if it's even touching in politics, it has to be anonymous, just to protect our identities of my writers.
That being, how long has it been going on, the newsletter?
Since we've, it's a website. Our
Website?
So since our inception, it's always been anything.
Is it being picked up, translated in French or Madagascan language?
No.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Even the anonymous?
Yeah, even the anonymous. I mean, it's not picked up, but it is on the radar, and I know that it's. I have to think about it. I put myself on the line for many issues, especially LGBTQ, where our gay, trans, lesbian, and all citizens, especially young people, are threatened in daily life to be open and proud. And I had to put myself out there saying, this is what a queer person looks like. So
have you had repercussions?
Me, because I have the social privilege of understanding family. I come from abroad. That is the privilege of being a diaspora kid, where I get away with that. But being in Madagascar, I have to inform and educate, the people in a way that, how can we, be inclusive? How can we love each other? All that. But
I find that very, let's say, noble and unusual, in that you're using unusual in the sense that you decided being free with pushing LGBT issues, and drop that and wanting to use your social privilege to lift others, despite the fact you're doing it in English. Doing it using your social privilege protection that you have from your family to push these issues locally. That's really valuable. That's what I believe diaspora is, the good side of diaspora, impacting, coming back home, not with radical ideas, but with progressive ideas.
Yes.
Let's not assume that the return of every diaspora is there to push progressive ideas back in the country. And this is really important. Now, from the founder of Namsur, Alain, you tell us a little bit what you do, but I'm interested from you to tell us a little bit about the darker side of bots and the tools which are used. How is technology used negatively to get the diaspora to think bad thoughts, if I may just simplify it, and impact negatively? How are bots used, technology?
Well, thank you so much, Gerard, for this introduction, putting me on the spot, because as a provider of software and technology, you're asking me to look at the darkest side of it. So first of all, just to introduce my company, Namsur. This is a company I created about 10 years ago when AI and machine learning wasn't as fashionable. As a tool to recognize names, simply whether names are male or female, whether they are from Madagascar, or from Romania, or from France, and from Ghana. Australia is a bit more diverse and complex to analyze as a country from the name perspective, but that's what we started about 10 years ago. And it immediately became useful in aspects of gender equality. For example, the research about how many women and men are active in science in different fields was a report, She Figures by the European Commission, is using this technology. Another application is to engage diasporas for economic development, just by recognizing those names, for example, in the US, in C-level positions to attract foreign investments, for example, to a developing country that requires investment. So these are the major use cases that brought me already a year ago here to Ulpiana Forum. I'm very grateful to be invited again and to be able to share more now the darker side. Now, in the meantime, AI has become fashionable and social medias are everywhere. Now, social medias with respect to facts versus fictions are not so different from society at every time in history when false information spreads based on emotions. But one of the significant difference is what we call the digital bubble, which means that people can be connected as a network, which is great, and that's what these tools were designed for, to create these network and communities. A network of hairdressers in Italy, or a network of French in Madagascar or Malagasy in France. But these networks can suddenly live in a digital bubble where they share interests that are very close and that suddenly start to diverge from reality.
Okay, I'll put a question to you. There's Albanian car washers in UK. If I want to attract Albanian car washers in UK, what are the words I would use as a person who wants to influence them for my narrative?
Well, these digital platforms were designed for targeting people based on keywords and the likes that they have, and so you would find that LinkedIn, Facebook, all these platforms live on advertising. So they offer a possibility to target specific segments based on those keywords.
And how is Diaspora targeted?
So one possibility is just to use advertising through these platforms. But another possibility is also to create bots.
How does bot know that if I'm targeting Albanian car washers in UK, there's Albanian car washers, not the UK car washers?
So one approach, which was documented by an organization based in Lithuania called debunk.org.
Okay.
So they used our software,
Yeah.
not to map diasporas, not to find gender information, but to analyze what names had been chosen for bots.
Okay.
In the very specific context of one different disinformation campaign in 2023, that was again Russian pushed in the context of the Ukraine war.
Yeah.
And one way you can do that is, for example, to create lots of bots that would have Albanian names,
Yes.
that would have liked cars and car washings, in their bot life as
Yes.
Facebook agents.
And ideally as patriotic names as possible, right?
Yes, as possible. And then suddenly these bots are put to a different goal, different use. And even if they represent, I don't know, maybe 10% of this particular Albanian car washing community in the UK, hypothetically, the fact that they would reinforce suddenly a message would be enough to to make this message detected by the algorithms as popular. So it will suddenly start to go from nowhere to very visible. So there was a document from which you might find at develop.org that documented how these bots were created and how the names were chosen. One interesting aspect, for example, was that although the topic was purely around Lithuania, in this context of Russian-Ukraine war, they created lots of bots that would have names from Nigeria, from Kenya, from the west coast of Africa, to get also traction on this disinformation. Now, one of the reasons is also that Facebook is cheaper to promote ads in some regions of the world. The other reason is there were also some dissentments, existing dissentments, and interest to like this type of fake news in those populations, because of also resentments towards, let's say, the global north to the global south. And there was a very specific approach to create those bots and to tune the message towards these real people who then share this information from one social network to another.
Because Lucia told us the bright side of how cheap it is to debug them, let's say I'm paraphrasing as cheap, I'm interested in the other side. How cheap is it to do what you just said? Does it take a lot of money as a Russian propagandist to do this, or is it called very little to open accounts, open it with names, attract?
I do think it does take a lot of money, to be honest, because I do think there is a strong effort also of these platforms to moderate, to detect bots, to maybe not enough, but they really try. I want to share also a bit more on the bright side, because I do think that we shouldn't be fighting bots with bots, or AI with AI. In the end, the real question is, what is the truth? What is the fact? What is the false information? What is the intent? Who is trying to spread this information? And one part of diaspora engagement, which brings us together here, is also to understand how we can engage within these diaspora communities, where you have also scientists in top universities, who are people whose methodology, whose goals is to establish facts and have hypotheses. And you can't be a scientist, make an hypothesis and confirm and be right, but you're also a great scientist if you make an hypothesis and you prove it wrong. And so I think a big part of how we can bring diaspora engagement also to a proper use is also by creating those stronger networks with this goal, to be able to understand also the complexity of the world, have stronger moral grounds towards establishing truth, and creating those networks in a positive way. Now, there is a challenge also that AI is progressing really fast at mimicking human behavior. For example, at writing texts that is almost indistinguishable from text written by humans. So these tools can definitely be used for spreading disinformation, and it's also very hard to find one technology which is not double-edged and which cannot be used also either in a positive or in a negative way.
Thank you. We will continue. I'm sure there'll be lots of questions for you, but I mean, your field is vast. bots and AI to be used for good and for bad. Alan, you come from an academic department that is called Migration Hub. Not a lot of universities have migration hubs, but coming from Western Balkans, we have huge number of Croats, Serbs, Bosniaks, Albanians who have moved to Australia, far away land, but live. Also, we have readers from, I know we have all the Western Balkans, we have readers from that part of the world. How are you navigating between these? The Australians are themselves a big diaspora around the world, but I'm more obsessed with our diaspora clearly in your country. But what does the Migration Hub assist these communities with?
Yeah, thanks so much. Like everyone else, just wanted to start by saying what a pleasure it is to be here, and how refreshing it's been to see a bit of Kosovo and to meet everybody here. And it seems like you know, the community that you have here of practitioners and government officials and so forth is it really has a very positive project, which has been very, very refreshing. So yeah, thank you for the hospitality. I'm the director of something called the ANU Migration Hub. ANU stands for the Australian National University. So we're in Canberra, the capital city of Australia. And the Migration Hub is a group of 110 PhD qualified academic researchers who work full time at the Australian National University on various issues around human migration and mobility, including diaspora. So we have a group of migration lawyers who specialise in things like asylum, refugee and citizenship law. We have a group of sociologists and anthropologists who work on migrant identity and social cohesion and these kinds of issues. There's a group in the health faculty, the School of Health and Medicine, which looks at the psychological aspects of asylum seeker adaptation to Australia. There's people looking at the global politics of migration, how migration policy is formed. There's economists looking at, you know, the macroeconomics of development as it relates to migration, remittances and so forth, labour mobility, and so forth. So a big group of experts working on migration, and the mission of the Migration Hub is to be upstream of public debates and decision making about migration. So a great example of why that relates to this issue of misinformation at the moment is just the context of the 2024 global elections. We've had, you know, the biggest year in democracy ever in human history, and in many countries around the world, including in Australia and the United States, migration has been the key issue on the ballot, and yet the facts are often lost in that debate, and big policy decisions affecting hundreds of millions of people's lives, trillions of dollars are being made on the basis of fear and prejudice regarding migration and diaspora communities rather than facts and evidence. So the idea of the Migration Hub is that we produce the fundamental knowledge about migration and migration-related issues. We translate and communicate that into public debate, informing journalists, informing politicians, so that the quality of deliberation improves, and ultimately we make better decisions about migration. A good example of that is in Australia at the moment, also in Canada, in the US and UK, many countries, there's a fallacious debate about the relationship between post-pandemic migration and housing. So the conventional narrative that has become a political fact, a fact accepted in media and by politicians, is that a surge of migration after the pandemic has led to steep rises in the costs of housing and rental costs as well. I have an economist working full-time on this issue at the moment, and it's false. This is not the case. There are other, migration is a very small part of the housing puzzle. There are many other issues that account for rising housing costs after the pandemic, and yet this has become a political fact. So what the Migration Hub has been doing is, we just get the research out there. We have conferences, as well as publishing scientific papers, we have conferences, we do briefings, we brief politicians, we brief journalists. We try to drive the news cycle rather than having kind of press releases from people who don't know anything about migration, driving the news cycle around migration and feeding into this toxic debate around the issue. We drive the news cycle with the facts. And so, a good example of how that works is, the political debate in Australia, the central issue of the upcoming election was going to be net migration. And this was driven by the opposition party, knowing that they could wedge the government on this issue. So we've just been countering each piece of misinformation with facts, and now they've given up on that issue. They're switching. They're saying, okay, we're not going to talk about migration anymore. That's no longer a wedge issue. We're not getting traction on it. So, yeah, it's much lower tech than the kinds of initiatives that have been discussed here. It's pretty sort of conventional fact bombs, which we just make sure get into the hands of decision makers and opinion shapers, so that we improve the quality of public deliberation, improve the quality of decisions as a result of that, and as a result of those better decisions, get better outcomes. So that's what we do.
David, I'd like to go to you, and thank you for standing through this to get to the point where I think my experience relates mostly to you. You're in your country, the poorest, the little that you've told me about what you're doing is how do you get a poor country, not so well-educated population, to be as resilient as possible. As I told you the background of Kosovo, we are the last in education. PISA results, we're behind, we're small, the poorest, maybe European country, not the poorest country, but the poorest European country. How do you make most out of not such sophisticated resources? Let's say Australia, France, Romania, yes, they are struggling with this information. Even sophisticated countries are clearly struggling with this information. How do we can expect countries like ours, behind in development and underdeveloped or in development, to face such an enemy when sophisticated countries cannot?
Yeah, that's a good question. Again, thank you for everyone who spoke in it. I think for us, for me, right, I started out my career in bioinformatics, computer science, and I was very excited about that, right? Complicated algorithms to work in just made my mind just go up. And then my dad will ask me, my dad is a farmer, he's been a farmer for 40 years, and you say, I see you're very excited about all these algorithms, but it makes no sense to me. Tell me how I can use that to grow better crops. And this is where I realized that we tend most of the time, especially as we think we are tech savvy, to build tools, build resources that have great potential, but cannot be used by the people who are really having a big impact in the world on the ground. So that's when I started refocusing my efforts towards how do I, knowing the things that I can, help unlock opportunities for my dad, but then it becomes for other people in communities who are trying to have an impact in there. So for me, in terms of this topic, right, when we talk about misinformation, there's the other side of like misinformation, and what are the differences? At the end of the day, it means somebody is receiving wrong information. Mm-hmm. But how it's happening is important. So misinformation for me is some information is being communicated. Whoever is receiving that information does not have the skills, the understanding to interpret it in the right way. How you solve that problem is different than what information is being communicated and somebody in between or whoever is supposed to communicate that information is misinterpreting that for whatever purposes they have. And there's a different technique for that. I think at the end of the day, it comes to a number of things that we've seen. There are social issues that we have to deal with in terms of, is there enough diversity? Are people having access to the right aspirations in order to understand that? But I also tend to focus on the technical aspects, which comes down to, do people have the technical skills in order to access information for themselves in the right way? Are we putting the right infrastructure in place? So a lot of my work with civil society, with journalists has been, hey, if we put enough capabilities in place for these organizations to establish places where anyone can go fact check information. So if I, David, say, hey, Ghana's elections, which happened actually this past weekend, was rigged, have we put in place a civil society infrastructure that allows anyone to check that?
How vibrant is the civil society? All this organizations. First, tell us a little bit context.
Yeah.
Do you have who to work with?
Yeah. So our civil society in Ghana is relatively quite strong.
Okay.
The main challenge, and I think this is where Diaspora comes in, right? This is mostly funded by external donors,
Yeah.
right? And I think this is an opportunity where we can engage our diaspora to say, hey, there are opportunities for you not only to engage people on just the civil aspects, but this also feeds into how we perceive Ghana as a place for people to invest in and come in. I think there's a narrative to be told that our civil society can hear.
And you yourself live and work in Ghana,
I live in Berlin, Germany.
but you are assisting these NGOs.
Yes. So that's the work.
Remotely or physically?
I try to go as much as possible. I had a daughter 3 years ago, so I said, let me take some time back, but the goal is to keep on going back. And I think that the most important thing, a lot of my work was around open data. So the idea behind open data is, if facts can be changed by anyone, because the reality is if people do not have access to data, right, and the quality is not good, everything that our machine learning algorithms are feeding off is the data. But if we can start out with government agencies even making data available, right, and we can enable people to have the skills. When I talk about the skills, there's a lot of assumptions that we're making when it comes to these technologies. We say AI is a great technology, but the reality for somebody in Ghana is that most of the time the power is out. To be even able to purchase data to use the internet is quite expensive. It can be anywhere from like 30% or upwards of their income, right, to access data in that sense.
Just give us an idea how off is electricity during 24-hour day in an average town in Ghana?
Well, average town, if you're talking about Accra, great. If you start going on the outskirts, people actually do not have the power on. So you actually have them either going to a community center, listening to things on the radio.
And
So
what's the most often used form of media?
I had to say no, but in Ghana, that does not work.
Yeah.
I cannot visualize something for somebody to come on a computer and try to watch it. I have to now think about how do I make them hear it on radio.
So how do you make them? How do you make radio interested in whatever you have to say, open data?
Yeah.
Why do radio people care about open data?
Yeah. And what we found was that I think some of the mistakes that I made and some people make is that we think we know better or we have better innovations than local communities. And that is not true, right? They have found ways of being resilient and solving problems for themselves.
Tell us about some tools. How are they really?
Well, so I'll give you an example of some work that we did in Nigeria with a civil society organization that's called the Women Environmental Program, right?
Okay.
So this is a group that is led by community people whose goal is to focus on issues related to women and the environment because they believe it actually has an impact on them.
Yeah.
So for time, they would do data surveys because they believe that in order to influence the government on what to invest in locally, it's important to actually talk to people from the community. Brilliant. The way they went about that was paper-based. So they would go about with paper for days, bring all that in, translate that, and it takes months for them to really get that insight.
What was on the paper? What were they spreading?
Well, no, they were asking about, hey, what services, so they take it on. So I think about 20 pages of information on the survey that you have to keep and make sure it's not lost.
Yes.
So they came to us and they said, hey, This is something that we've been doing,
Not inserting stuff online that we're used to now.
not in certain,
Doing
but
it physically, okay?
is there a way to improve this? And it turns out actually there are very simple tools that allow you to do data collection. One of them is called Kobo 2Box. It works on an open data platform that has been produced. And in a number of days, we were able to train their same data collectors to be able to collect this information. Once it's collected, it becomes visually available for the team. They were
Yes.
able to put things together.
How many
And,
people could be interviewed through that project?
So we
Roughly.
trained about 10 people, and they were able to talk to over 300 people within a matter of 2 days,
Yeah.
which usually would take a couple of months, requiring more people, a chance of data being lost. So this is an example of not high-tech necessarily capabilities,
Yes.
but leveraging something that they brilliantly developed and saying, is there a way that technology can help? And I think for me, that's usually the approach that I want to have, is understanding what people are already innovating on, and then asking the question, can technology help in that? Because most of the time,
Also being humble enough and modest enough to understand that everything you've learned and used in Berlin has to be put aside and invent new tools for the community to work. Your former father, I think, is a great story. Like, what would your father buy in
Exactly.
terms of algorithms? He wouldn't buy all these things. They are not useful to him.
and it doesn't mean that he's not interested in that, but I think the main thing is, can he get to a place where he wants to be interested in that? And most of the time, people are dealing with more other issues. Doesn't mean that this information doesn't exist, but they do have aspirations. And I think the goal is, can we who have been in the diaspora, who have these things that we learn, be humble enough to say, I am going to listen to what you're doing and what you've been able to solve. And my goal is, can I help you remove any bridge that helps you become the originator and owner of the technologies? The current pace at which we're going with Gen AI, we have a few countries that are producing a lot of this technology, and it's not scalable for most of the world. It's actually going to lead to optimizing for specific things around profits. And one thing I like to say is, like, technology only optimizes for whatever values that have been baked into the system. And this is what we're seeing much more. So I'm very much interested in creating more diversity when it comes to the space around data, around technology. And I think that to some extent will help mitigate the redistribution of facts, because you have more people having the ability to check it. Is it true? And then we can have a conversation around that.
Yeah. Any questions from the audience? This is a time when we could take questions. Yes. Introduce yourself.
Hi, my name is Violeta and I'm from CDF. My question is, in general, how can diaspora networks build trust in digital knowledge sharing?
How can diaspora
Networks build trust in digital knowledge sharing.
build trust and digital knowledge here?
Yes.
Here in Kosovo or here in any communities where they
In any communities.
build digital knowledge? I think we've seen an example. Yours is building digital knowledge. Any tips?
Yeah, I'd be happy to answer that. Actually, around fake news, disinformation, especially the one like you described, which is really targeted and built with an intention, actually it makes sense to have a formal group to be able to identify these disinformation. So, for example, in France, I know there is one division of the one government agency called Viginum that has the responsibility to identify foreign-directed disinformation campaigns. But also, there are some very simple initiatives. There is in Paris also every year, usually in April, an academic and mixed civil society conference called Infox sur scène. Infox means fake news. That happens. It's organized by François Bancillon, who's a computer guy, but he brings people from all diverse communities. And one of the objectives is also around education. I totally agree with David that data has and especially open data is a key aspect, but also education to digital work, but be able to have a critical view on facts, on information, on technology as well. One idea is also to create, let's say, an education on fake news, how to make them, and how to propagate them. So one idea that we had as part of this Infox sur Scène is to take the opportunity of the 1st of April, which is normally the only day where you can make your own fake news and try to push them and see whether they will work, and see how we could try that in schools, and show them that, if you make a fake news, if you send it to 5 people which you sorted from the most credulous, they might start to spread it. Again, it has to be harmless fake news, but it's a way also to show to young people that these tools, Facebook, Instagram, and so on, are not just for fun. They're also to spread information, or TikTok, and they can have real impact on the world in terms of elections. And so yes, I do believe education is important. Again, the creation of networks with the diaspora is important to be able to bring also, again, scientists. Now, you mentioned also that establishing facts with a scientific approach is also something that takes methodology and effort and funding. And there are organizations to do that, which are universities. And, maybe in Kosovo there isn't all the support for establishing facts on complex issues like impact of climate change, or specific aspects that are extremely costly to do. But there can be, through the network of diaspora, access to those type of talents and resources.
Yeah. Yes?
I'll volunteer an answer as well. Thank you so much. You're absolutely right. I think digital education, civic education are so important, but it's going to take a really long time to root a practice and a certain behavior, to be able to avoid misinformation. What I would suggest, build coalitions of lobbying, like these platforms need to be regulated more competently, by the European Union, by whatever institutional body that has that power. It's very important. Thank you.
Yes?
I'm gonna, because your question was around how you can participate in knowledge ecosystems, right? Diaspora. I'm gonna give an example that I'm struggling with right now.
Yeah.
I'm living in Germany right now. I'm trying to find how can I get the best Ghanaian foods in Germany. They tend to be quite a lot.
Yeah.
I think one of the powerful things that diasporas have already figured out in the countries that they are in, they have built ways of finding information that other people do not have, right? So even beyond even fighting disinformation and all that, really starting to ask yourself, how have we navigated information ecosystems within the places that we are away from home, right? And at least for Ghanaians, we currently are struggling to make sure that we're connecting much more. So I will start from there. I would say within whatever country you are in what ways have you cultivated knowledge ecosystems? They may not be digital, and then the next phase becomes, is there a way to optimize it a little bit more so that if a new person comes into that same location, they don't have to go through that same struggle? So for me, in the future, maybe I shouldn't go through that same struggle to be able to find where the best Ghanaian restaurant is in Berlin. And if you can build that and it becomes its own entity, it then can have political influence. It can have other influences. So that's one way to really start approaching that.
So, one way that Madaliving, how we grew so fast was during COVID. And when we had the inception of Madaliving, what I really wanted was for our diaspora to connect with local people. So we, what I did was fostering these digital communities to be the platform for these digital knowledge systems. So I think building community online through our series, such as my Diaspora Tantad, where we share diaspora stories. The local Malagasy folks, it's opposite. Oh, well, I don't know if maybe Kosovars have the same feeling, but when I moved to Madagascar, people were jealous of me. They're like, we want to leave, and you're coming back? What are you doing? And through building these digital communities, it's helping to lessen that, you know, social gap that has been waged since diaspora communities have started, you know, growing. So, yeah.
2 more questions. One here, then gentleman.
Thank you so much. I would like to tell you this, how we handle misinformation in Belgium. For instance, Belgium takes it very seriously, and what we are doing, for instance, in Belgium is you have all the tools to teach, to educate people, especially elderly people, and also the youngest, you know, the young youth, because even if they are with a screen the whole day, they are less digital savvy than other people. So all the tools to educate people on the misinformation, etc., is open source, online, and free to use. I can even share, you know, later the website where you can find all this information. So then anyone can take all those tools and then use them again. And then, for instance, I set up a training for undocumented migrant women, and I use those tools to educate those migrant women who didn't go to school, who were illiterate, to help them to, you know, to differentiate to make the difference between truth and fake news, etc.
Great. Gentleman over there. Thank you for your input.
Yeah, my name is Andrews, Ghanaian but based in Denmark. David mentioned sources of information. One of the things that you left out is television. In Ghana, television is very popular. Even in some of the rural communities, you find people with television, and they love it because it comes with motional pictures, and then a lot of them listen to these broadcasters. These days, even what do we call it? Radio is not as popular as television. So maybe that is the correction that I want to bring across. But there's another thing that I'm a bit worried, if you guys can help me. How do we also address misinformation and disinformation from the government side? That is where I also have the problem. Because in my country, Ghana, politicians tend to influence information a lot because they want to win elections. Now, for instance, government will say the economy is not doing well because of Russia-Ukraine war. Partially it's true, but it's not wholly true. And so they hide behind that and then mess up the economy with the hope that people understand that all the crises of poor performance come as a result of Russia-Ukraine war. To me, it's not true because we have found out that, no, sometimes they hide behind it and then corrupt the system. And another example was this COVID issue. When the COVID also came, we had so much news and information. It comes from China. The Chinese government has intentionally brought this to do ABCD. And so in this case, what do we do? Because if you fight against that, maybe the government in power, if it's not democratic enough, will silence you by saying, why are you questioning the government narrative? And so what do we do to make sure we also not fall into government line and all the time say what the government is saying is wholly true? And I don't think, personally, sometimes governments can lie. So how do we address this issue? Thank you.
Yes.
Yeah, great. If I can address that last one, Andrew's a great question. And here I think
this is an example where there really is an important role for the diaspora to play in many contexts. I think the problem you're talking about of government spread misinformation is obviously huge, but particularly concentrated in countries that don't really have strong free press and academic institutions. So often developing countries, I think, this is a real problem, or where, you know, maybe the courts, there's not a sort of contestational system in place where the government as the one source of truth can be, you know, contested in any way. And in those contexts, when diaspora groups are living in countries that do have stronger institutions, do place a really high value on public debate, on separation of powers, so there are sources of facts and truth to contest government power. People who are living in those countries really can and do play a super important role in fighting back against government misinformation. Of course, that can be double-edged. You know, it can be the case that sort of, militias in exile are spreading misinformation sometimes to try and undermine governments at home just because they want to replace them. So it's not the case that diasporas are always, have a positive motive in that respect. But I do think in the kind of example that you're talking about, this is a textbook case of where the diaspora can really contribute to a healthier and more fact-based public discourse. Yeah.
I want, for the end, to answer the CDF colleague question. How diaspora can use digital knowledge and apply it in Kosovo? I want to also note we have a request from diaspora to go in the opposite direction. How can digital knowledge that we've created in Kosovo be applied to actually communities in diaspora which do not have this service, i.e. fact-checking and civil society? Because right now we have the investment that has come from our end towards 500,000 Kosovars who live abroad is mainly to spread, it goes around culture, language activities, sports and music. What we're finding is that although this forum also is witness to great minds, scientists, experts that have been brought up abroad and we are using here, we also have a certain cast of Kosovo Albanian people who have turned up criminals abroad. So the darker side of things is we are being asked how to impact disfranchised, radicalized, non-privileged young youths that have gone abroad without family support and are now in top ratings. Our nation is turning up in UK and Norway in top populations of jails in Norway and UK, unfortunately. So we have to talk about this difficult thing that we expect only from diaspora to send us to apply their digital knowledge. We are being asked, hey, we don't want you, the media of Kosovo, and we are being asked, you as institutions of Kosovo have to not forget that you have to take care of a population that is not turning out brilliant. There's nothing we can help scientists, academics, and great successful Kosovar people that have reached success. Yes, we have benefits, we should use them. But maybe what I'm struggling with is what services can we offer to communities who are saying, we are actually not served by some other parts of civil society that we need to work with our communities. So we are also struggling with how to apply potentially, for example, digital knowledge abroad. We have not figured it out. We in Kalzo, I'm talking now as a leading fact-checking organization that has partnered with Facebook to fact-check information. We are the local partner, but I'm not sure we are reaching disfranchised diaspora men, largely young men, who are ending up in jail. And I'm kind of dilemmaing, what can we do for them? Can we reach out to them? So it goes both ways with diaspora. On this note, I thank everybody for a really, really useful discussion. I took a lot personally out of this, and good examples you gave that we can apply everywhere in the world. I thank a very interested and animated audience. Thanks to Ulpiana Forum for bringing you, paying your tickets. This is so important that you've come from so far, and we usually cannot afford people from Madagascar and Australia especially. The rest are from Europe, not so far. So it's amazing to have this diversity. Thank you for coming.
Thank you for having us.